One. Hey everybody, Spencer Hogan here, BDM with Fidance. I'm with my friend Jon Rike. He's the Chief Information Officer for the City of Dayton. Jon, why don't you say hi to everybody?
Hello, everybody. Spencer mentioned Jon Rike at the City of Dayton. Excited to talk about all the great work we're doing here in the technology department and the efforts we're putting forth to better serve our citizens here in the City of Dayton.
Good stuff there, man. So Jon and I, we got connected, a year and a half ago. I actually met him at a CDO Summit event. It was with CDO Magazine. I attended your breakout session almost by accident, frankly, and I saw you on LinkedIn. I saw you were connected to my dad, family of business, and so I went up and introduced myself to you. Come to find out that you guys have known each other for years, and you've become honestly a great work friend. It's always fun to see you around events, man. You've got a great smile to your face, and when you're in IT, man, that's not always the case. You don't get a whole lot of happy folks, I'd say.
No.
But anywho, man. So Jon, let's jump into this there, brother. So tell me a bit about your early life, your upbringing. How did that kind of shape your perspective on leadership and problem solving?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity, Spencer. And you know, what's funny is that you were probably not the only person that attended my session by accident, but that's okay. Hopefully somebody got something good out of the session. But to your question, about, kind of my early upbringing and how that might have influenced, my career trajectory, my path, what have you. My early childhood, both of my parents worked. And things were a lot different in the late 70s, early 80s. Daycare wasn't as prevalent. Most of the daycare was provided by family members. And so I was blessed. My grandmother had retired pretty early. I got to spend a good majority of my childhood with my grandmother. This was one of the most remarkable women I've ever been around in my entire life. And I'll tell you why she was so remarkable to me. This lady had been through more loss during her life than anybody else I had seen. She had lost her husband when he was 46 years old. She had to raise two kids all by herself that were pretty young. She lost her mother to typhoid fever. When she was young, she lost her sister when she was 9. My oldest cousin was killed in a car accident when he was 20. She had been through a lot, had a pacemaker, had some health challenges. But the thing about my grandmother that I always admired and looked up to was that she did a lot of things simultaneously. And what those things were is, first, she demonstrated to me what perseverance looks like, right? She demonstrated and showed me what grit looked like. My grandmother demonstrated and showed me what determination looked like and felt like at certain points when I would run astray of the rules of the house. My grandmother was very resilient. And so, my early upbringing, I now looking back on it, I was like, oh God, we got to go to grandma's again, right? Or we're always at grandma's. Being a little older and looking back on it now, I realize what a gift that was. She was raised during the Great Depression, right? That book, The Greatest Generation, truly they are. And the lessons they're able to teach you and infuse into you, if you're willing to listen and learn, are amazing. And so, my grandmother, lastly, to this point, all that hardship she went through, she never, ever had a frown on her face. I never heard her use a curse word, never heard her talk badly about anyone. She once gave me a poem by a guy named Charles Swindoll. And this poem is phenomenal because it's all about your attitude. And I remember my grandma at one point, I had asked her because she had been through some stuff, and I was like, Grandma, I don't know how you can smile through this. And she said, grandson, because at the end of the day, the only thing you have control over is your attitude and how you react to life. She said, there's many things in life you can't control, but the one thing you certainly have control over is how you react, how you guide your attitude. And so you had mentioned coming in, smiling, being positive, having an optimistic outlook. Those were all things I learned from my grandmother. Those are things she instilled in me. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I could have had a better childhood than the time that I spent with my grandmother. Lastly, I'll tell you this funny story. She was 90 years old, Spencer, 90 years old. I had been cutting my grandmother's grass on the weekends. And so I go over there, not that she couldn't do it. I just like going over and spending time with her, sitting on her back patio and listening to a Reds game, right? So I go over to my grandmother's house and the grass is already cut. And I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? Because my mom had called me earlier in the week and said something to the effect that my grandmother had hurt her shoulder trying to cut the grass or something of that nature. And I was like, why would she do that? I cut the grass, and she thought I might have been too busy or whatever. So I go over there and their grass is already cut. And I said to my grandma, I was so disappointed. I was like, Grandma, why would you pay somebody to cut the grass? She said, well, I didn't pay anybody to cut the grass. I did it myself. And Spencer, she's got her arm in a sling. I kid you not. Right. And I said, Grandma, how would you cut your grass? Your arm's in a sling. She called Heil Brothers, that's in Kettering, and they had brought out, she had worked with them for a long period of time, been a good customer. They had brought out to her, she bought it over the phone, a electric start mower. So she didn't have to pull it. She electric started it and cut her own backyard. And it was on a hill. This lady was a nut. So, long story short, my upbringing was not that my parents weren't great. They were. Trust me, they were good parents. But my grandmother, salt of the earth, never been a true statement. She was something else and really instilled in me the value of hard work, but really the power of attitude.
That's a great story, man. I think that's the best story that I've heard so far with doing these interviews. In fact, it is because it's inspiring. I mean, that's powerful stuff, man. We were just talking about before we hopped on the call about how we've got a 9-month-old and he's starting to throw tantrums, and man, it's just different, going through that. But it gives me a lot of perspective hearing about your grandmother and her story there. I mean, that's awesome. And a little nugget about that's awesome is that there was a company that she was a good customer for that just did her solid, just brought her out a mower. I hope that one day, man, I've got relationships like that built up in my network of folks that hey, I need some help here. Can you guys help me out? So that's awesome, man. That's a great story.
Hey, Spencer, I will tell you this: the more good natured communications and interactions that you put out, the more you get back. And my grandma was that way. She always told me, she always got back tenfold what she put out. Right. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, because the more positive energy we put out into the ether, the more positive energy that comes back to us.
That's a good word, man. Can you share a bit about, so let's think about your career here. You, early on in your career as you're developing as a technologist, I would imagine. Tell me a bit about just early in your career, and can you think of a moment or a project that significantly contributed to your growth as a leader?
Yeah, I'll give you two quick stories that kind of highlight the first part of my career and then the second half of it. I was a junior at the University of Dayton. It was November, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting to the point where I'm almost a senior. I have no practical resume experience, right? The only thing that I had on there was cutting grass. And so I'm like, I've got, and at that point I had transferred in. I was an MIS major, and I'm like, I've got to get something moving within my major so that I can get hired when I graduate. So I walked over to the co-op office that used to be over on Caldwell Street, and I walk in. And they had hooked me up with this lady named Shirley Favors, and I believe Shirley is still there. She's an amazing woman. So I walk in, and Shirley's there, and I sit down at her desk, right, and she says, well, how can I help you? And I said, well, I'd love to get a co-op work term for next semester. And she just shakes her head and she says, oh, bless your heart. She's like, it's November. She's like, all the jobs are gone. And so I'm deflated, right? And I'm like, oh God, and now I've got to postpone my graduation because I got to get a work term in, what have you. So she twists around. She's like, well, maybe I've got one thing left. So she gets into her little filing cabinet, comes back around, and she's like, well, I've got this one opportunity over at UDIT at the university. And at the time, Spencer, UDIT didn't have a great reputation at the university, right? Because this is kind of like the entry point of enterprise technology. Email, internet, all that stuff. Anyway, our network wasn't necessarily resilient, right? It wasn't dependable, and so that was the first. Obviously, everybody notices when the network's not good. Right. And I was a fledgling technologist at the point, and I'm like, God, I don't want to work for UDIT. Right. Certainly. So long story short, I took the opportunity. Right. And this was right when Y2K was coming in. And so my first big queue up was to get prepped to support the conversion into Y2K. So Spencer, I kid you not, I go through that this first week on the job, and I came out with two observations about technology. One, man, I'm gonna have to work really hard to connect with some of these people because I try to get them on sports, politics, anything, and it was all straight tech, right? So you got to have some way to build rapport. But the other thing, I was like, wow, this is really cool because this whole Y2K thing never happened. I was like, I just got paid a tremendous amount of money to be on staff all week, and this never happened. So I was like, maybe there's something to this technology work. I was like, I don't go home sweaty. I don't have grass all over my pants. I was like, wow, this maybe working with your brain instead of your brawn is the way to go. Long story short, I took the job at UDIT and was blessed to not only work under great administrators, whether that was Brother Ray Fitz, whether that was Ted Kissel over in athletics, what have you. I got to sit and watch really good leaders. And I think as a young professional, one of the best things you can have is an environment by which you get the opportunity to watch, observe, and learn from great leaders. And so that was one piece that was just phenomenal because UD had, and they still do have phenomenal staff and faculty leaders there. But I think the other thing that was important for me was trying to learn about tech, right? And being able to grow up through the growth of the technology industry. And so I started as a desktop tech, then went on to manage service desk, and then continued to grab other pieces of the IT operation. Because at the same time I'm growing is the same time that IT is making this really big pivot from being technology focused to service focused, right? And I found myself being in the right place at the right time because my mentality on IT was always about service, not the tech. And I think that's why the alignment of my time at UD and what they needed at that time was really good because people were looking at technology differently, right? They were wanting to consume consistent, predictable, transparent services. The whole thought of I'm going to stand up a server and you're just going to take it or leave it. Those days are kind of over. And so I was really blessed to, again, learn from a lot of great people. My boss at the time, a lady named Jackie Jackson, was probably the most kind and compassionate boss I've ever had. She allowed me to grow. She gave me enough room to make mistakes, but never enough room where I'd make a mistake that would ruin my reputation or confidence, right? And that's a great leader that has the confidence in herself to allow you to go out and run a little bit. So it was amazing. But I'll tell you that the second piece was actually when I left UD. Because UD is a great place. Many people, if you go there, you typically don't, it's like the mafia, right? Or the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you want, but you never leave. I mean, because people love it. It's a great place to work. But I was at a point where I had been there almost 20 years, right? I had done what I felt was everything that I could possibly do at the University of Dayton. And you get to a point in your career where, okay, am I going to wonder what could have been, or I'm going to take a chance and know that I tried, right? And understand that everything happens for a reason. And so, when I left UD, it was tough. I first went over to Montgomery County, spent some time over there, learned a lot about municipal government, worked with a lady I worked for over there, Amy Wiedemann, is just like Jackie, a great boss, really organized, a phenomenal administrator. Joe Tuss was our county administrator, another guy that just was a phenomenal leader. And so I spent some time over at the county. And then when this job came up at the City of Dayton, I'll be honest, at first I wasn't sure that this was the right spot for me. But after talking with the staff and talking with the leadership, what I quickly realized was that this was a place where I could use what I do best to my fullest. Right? It's about bringing a new air of positivity, bringing a new confidence to the work of IT, establishing new trust so that as we build partnerships, they're on a sound foundation, but ultimately changing the psychology, right? Because I'm not a technologist, by heart. I mean, that's not what drives me. What drives me is the ability to be a great coach for all the technologists. What drives me is creating an environment where these technologists can grow and be their best. And so we're 3 years in on this amazing journey. I'm not sure it will stop even when I retire, because I think what people have found is that work can be more than just showing up from 8 to 5. Work can be more than just handling your task list, right? And here at the city, that's the beauty that we have. Like, I'll give you an example. This weekend, we're doing a digital equity day at the Greater Dayton Rec Center. This is all about making sure that our residents understand how to connect to the digital resources that they quite literally need to exist and survive in today's digital economy. Those are things, in corporate, you probably, I don't know, you might get the opportunity to do that, you might not. But at the City of Dayton, we're all about people. We've got to drive revenue, et cetera, and we've got to ensure that we've got tight budgets. But at the end of the day, our job is to change people's lives. And that's what I love about working here at the city. Not only just my staff, but the folks out in the community that we get to serve every day.
That's great stuff, man. A lot of good stuff in there. I mean, I think about your what you said a moment ago about you've always kind of viewed technology through the lens of a service to people, right? It was never about the tech itself. It was about the end user, the experience that you're creating, right? And the first point you had made there can resonate with this. You can't teach proximity to great leadership. You can't teach being around phenomenal leaders, people that have done great things in their career. I remember early on in my career, I was a youth pastor, and a lot of folks are always surprised that I was in youth ministry at some point. Now, if you get to know me a little bit, I don't think you can ever get that bug out of you, man. It's just baked into you forever. But when I was in youth ministry, our lead pastor was one of the owners of Prasco Pharmaceuticals. He's part of the family that owns that organization. It's a massive, one of the largest private pharmaceutical companies in the entire country. And I had met all of these unbelievable business leaders in our church that had a relationship with Jeff. And as a 19, 20-year-old kid, I didn't know at the time all these phenomenal people I was meeting and what they were really doing out in the marketplace. But all of those relationships ended up becoming advantageous to me in some way, one way or another, now moving into the for-profit world. And one of the biggest lessons that I had learned is just, man, the power of network, the power of being led by great people, the power of people that are not just great leaders, but are value-driven, people that care about others. And so in our case, right, leveraging IT as a service to serve and add value to other people. That's great points there, man. I can really resonate with you on a deep level. Let's move into talking about the city, though. So CIO, the city of Dayton, man. City of Dayton's. I think if you were not in the Cincinnati Dayton region, you wouldn't realize how enormous of a city the city of Dayton is, and how much of an epicenter it is for technology, frankly, in this region. It really in the country, frankly. But really, the Dayton and Columbus in particular, we could go round robin about just what those two cities mean to the entire industry. But tell me a bit about your role as a CIO. What are challenges you're running into? You've talked a lot about positivity and changing that culture. And tell me just about the challenges you run into.
Yeah, it's I've been here a little over 3 years, and one of the hardest things as a new leader is to come in and to try to create the motivation for movement and growth without necessarily indicting what was done in the past, right? That's always a very fine line as a new leader that you have to walk. But I think what the staff here at the city understands is that as we look to the future, the challenges are significant. And I think the only way the city of Dayton continues to play the role that we've traditionally played as it relates to improving lives is through technology. We aren't going to get any more bodies. The capacity is probably either going to stay static or go down. And the only way I've ever found to do more with less, I know everybody says, "Oh, I'll do more with less." Technology, automation, right? The things that drive productivity and efficiency. And so, as the leader of the IT organization, one of the first and foremost things that I've got to manage is our psychology and our culture, right? What is that gas that's going into the engine of the IT department? And I think, as we had talked about being a service, minded leader, to me, it's all about service. Right? It's all about how do we serve each other first, right? Because if what happens behind the screen isn't tight and aligned, customers will feel that. And then how do we serve the customer really, really well? And how do we never be satisfied with where we are, right? And that's a mindset. And I think, it kind of goes back, you had asked that initial question about early influences. And, my mom was a teacher. And, teaching and education is all about continual growth. I think there's a lot of analogies or a lot of similarity between education and IT, because ultimately, if we want to remain relevant, right, to the business, and that's what we all want. They talk about partnership, but it's relevance, right? That relevance to me has to be driven by continual improvement and growth. Because as the business grows and moves and changes, if we're not moving, growing, and changing alongside them, then that gap of relevance continues to grow. And so I think that as a new leader here at the city, or relatively new leader, first I had to get my team thinking the right way, looking at themselves the right way, bringing themselves to work with a little bit of confidence, right? Because if you don't have confidence in yourself, I'm not sure anybody else will. So you've got to show up. You've got to show up the right way. But ultimately, as we talk about some of the challenges, that's where I started, was with people. Because I'd asked somebody the other day, Spencer, I said, what do all great, because it was the Final Four, I said, what do all great college coaches have in common?
Oh man, I can tell you this: they're able to inspire. I can tell you they're able to inspire. Um, the easy answer is they have a way of building culture, camaraderie. But I don't think that's the right answer. What are you thinking?
Well, it's a good answer, but I'll tell you, I thought about this. Um, the one thing they all have in common is they all had great players. I don't know any Hall of Fame coaches have, so to me as a coach, because that's how I look at myself. I don't look at myself as a CI. I'm a coach, right? And I've got to create a game plan. I've got to make sure the right players are in the right spots, and I got to get them out on the field, right? And then ensure they have the confidence to go out and shoot their shots. And I think for me, what I realized is that I will always be um, my performance will always be determinant on the quality of the people that I have on our staff. And so that's, for me, has been a number one. How can I aggressively and relentlessly go out and recruit the best talent that I can get in here at the City of Dayton? And I'll tell you what, it does make a difference, because first year didn't have a lot of opportunity to bring in talent. Next 2 years brought in a decent amount of talent. We've probably over the last 2 years, 3 years, we've probably switched over about 40% of our department, which is a significant amount of change interpersonally, and for your staff. It has been a phenomenal transformation for us. New ways of thinking, new experiences, new skills. It has just been a game changer. And so, I think about talent. I think I'd mentioned to you the budgetary pressures that we're all facing as municipalities here in the state of Ohio, because we're all driven on income tax. And at the City of Dayton, unless we add population, which we have not in many, many decades, or unless the rate of pay significantly goes up, which it kind of has, but it's been met with the raise of everything else. There aren't a lot of new revenues coming in here to the city. And so as I'm trying to make up for probably a decade worth of deferred investment on our infrastructure, et cetera, I'm probably doing it at the most challenging time budgetarily. And so this would really be, Spencer, if you would ask me, the technology challenges, okay, we can address those. But the two biggest ones that I have, first, people, because nothing good can happen without the right people. But the second would be the funding to help us continue to modernize our infrastructure and our architecture, so that we can take this place into the future.
That's really good. Love your analogy about being a coach there, and bringing in excellent talent, and how crucial that is to accomplishing anything you want to accomplish there. Tell me more. Let's jump into this about trends in the marketplace. Tell me, what's a tip or a piece of advice you'd offer to somebody, to a young person in the marketplace? And I know you kind of hinted at a couple of things earlier, specifically as it pertains to positivity. But if you were talking to somebody that was a technologist in their mid-20s, what would you tell them that is paramount for them as they develop their career?
Ooh, gosh, there's so many things, that if I could go back, I would probably do differently. Here's one. Somebody had told me a couple years ago, and I've tried to take this to heart. They'd given me a Truman quote. And it was really about going back to lifelong learning and how important it is to continually grow and advance your skill sets, your understanding. And basically the quote goes as, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers, right? And to me, that struck a chord, because it really resonates with the tech industry, because I like to read a lot. I love to hear about what's happening, what trends are evolving, where are things headed, because that to me is the exciting part of technology. And then even more exciting, being able to take some of those leading edge trends and bringing them into your production environment, and really just blowing people away with the power of the technology. I would say that would be one of my first pieces of advice for a person entering the technology field is that if you're not comfortable with continual growth, if you're not comfortable with continually learning or reading, this is going to be a really challenging environment for you to be in. Right? Technology is going to be a really tough place to be because it continually changes. If you don't want change, which my mother, I'll be quite honest, was a little resistant to change, be a French teacher. Because guess what does not change very often? The French language. And so, there are things out there that you can do, but tech admit, right? This is something that changes very quickly. The other thing, and you mentioned this earlier, I think this is for a young, aspiring technologist, your network is everything. Everything. Whatever time you're spending on building your network, I would advise you to double it, because that's a mistake that I made in my early 20s, even into my 30s. I just wanted to go to work, do my work, go home, hang out with my buddies, right? Do what I wanted to do. That's okay. You can do that, right? But you're going to miss opportunity. I would give you 100% guarantee that you will miss opportunities, not only for yourself, but for people around you. Right? Because that's one of the greatest things in the world is where you can use your network to connect people. Right? Say you've got a friend that just got laid off. I'm actually in this situation right now. A colleague of mine, his wife was impacted by a reduction of force. Maybe a really good opportunity that I just heard about in another area of my network. How fun is that? Right? To be able to take something, connect people, and watch the magic happen. And so those would probably be the two biggest. Continue to learn, be a voracious reader, but also really go after your network. And don't be shy. People are never going to bite your head off if you send them a LinkedIn note and said, "Hey, never met you, but boy, I'm really impressed with what you've done. You got some time to chat, or you want to grab some coffee?" I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, the answer is not going to be no.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. And I think that there's a stigma that they don't have time, they don't want to, they're too busy, and certainly they don't have a lot of time and they're busy. But I've never met somebody that's has said, "Hey, I won't share 15 minutes with you to
Right.
talk a bit about my career and some wisdom I can give you." I've never met somebody. Maybe that's the optimist in me and the optimist in you, but I also say this, man. I think most people are eager to talk about themselves and they're proud of what they've done in
Right.
their career, and they're excited to be able to share that with somebody that wants to learn about it. It's not every day
Right.
that you get the chance to talk about the things that you've accomplished. So, really good advice there, man. What are some trends in the industry that folks need to be paying attention to?
Well, if I didn't mention AI, I think I would lose my street cred as a CIO. But what I would say is this: is that within the area of AI, there's two things that I think I'm most interested in right now. One would be the challenge that we have here at the City of Dayton with our current data architecture in our ability to fully implement and exploit AI. Right. So, from a selfish, internally looking perspective, I'm curious to see how we can modify and evolve our data architecture to be more prepared to take advantage of these new tools, because we simply have no choice but to try. Right. We talked about capacity constraints. Well, I can tell you just from a commercial AI side of the house, just letters, memos, briefs, article summaries, recommendations. All that stuff has been made easier administratively for me through some of the tools that are available. But I think the other thing that I've been really interested in, read a lot about, is the intersection between AI and cybersecurity. Right, because there's a lot of different planes that's going to exist on it, right? And so, I mean, you're thinking about deep fakes and the impact that may have with social engineering and things of that nature. You're thinking about data analysis and all the power that, I mean, I saw a demo the other day of Copilot layered on top of Power BI, and it was one of the coolest things that I've seen in quite a while, right? Talk about the human factors side of cyber and how AI will impact that. So to me, that's what I've been really interested in is obviously AI creates some new opportunities for the bad guys. But I'm a believer, going back to the optimist, in me. I'm a believer that AI is going to create significantly more benefits for the good guys on the cyber side than it will for the bad guys. And so that, if you were to ask me what's one thing I've been trying to find anything I can read lately, it's really about AI, cyber, the psychology piece of how that all may manifest itself and things of that nature. So that's kind of what's gotten me the most excited right now.
That's great. Last question here is, what are some things that you're reading, places that you go to, or folks that you read from that can help other people cut through the noise of what's out there?
Whew. Tell you what, there are. What I try to do is find people who are really voracious readers, and then follow them and see what they're reading. So I'll give you this book right now is the one I'm reading. It's called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. So you've probably heard about the 5 dysfunctions, right? Great book. My department right now is living through the 5 dysfunctions. We're talking about all those things like trust and accountability, which sound so easy, but are so not easy, right? Because trust is so fickle, right? You build it in drops, but then you can kick the whole bucket over in one movement and lose it all, right? So this book, this ideal team player for me is resonating right now because ultimately, and I'll give folks a quick cliff notes or John notes on this. His point is there are virtues of the ideal team player, and there are really 3 that are most succinct, right? You've got to be humble, you've got to be hungry, and you've got to be smart. And it's not technical smarts; it's interpersonal, smarts, that emotional intelligence that we all talk, the EQ, right? And I will tell you, I'm going through this now for the second read because I knew I missed things on the first time through. This is going to fundamentally change how I look at potential candidates and leadership candidates that I may already have within my department. Because the more I think about this, the more I realize every awesome team player that I have ever had the opportunity to be on a team with, work with, guess what they've all had? These 3 things. Right? They have a lot of humility, right? A lot of self-depreciating humor. They're hungry. They don't sit on their hands, right? They've got this bias for action. They want to do things. They don't sit still. And then lastly, they know how to deal with people, right? They know how to never put their foot in their mouth or always seem to say the right thing. These are the kind of people that I'm going to start putting an additional filter, on my interactions, because this is what I want a team full of ideal team players. Because can you imagine how productive, how efficient, how really ultimately how much fun that would be to be in an environment like that? So that's what I'm reading right now. Lencioni is a great author. There's one other I would promote because this one taught me a real good lesson. Hold on one second. I've got it for you, I swear. But this is actually, I lent it out. There's a book called The Leadership Challenge. And I don't know if you've heard of Barry Posner or Jim Cousy. Those guys, that Leadership Challenge is amazing, Spencer. And here's where I will end this comment. So during the Leadership Challenge, they did something that I think all leaders have to do. And if you've never done this, Center for Leadership over at UD can walk you through it. But there's this thing called the Leadership Practices Inventory. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but this is the inventory of things, if you're a really good leader, you should be doing every day. So the reason this is so easy for me to grab, because it sits right here on my desk, because at least once a day, there are 30 different things in the inventory. Once a day, I'm going through here real quick. Did I do this today? Did I do this today? Did I do this today? And I'll just give you 2, right? I follow through on the promises and commitments that I make. I just mentioned trust, right? I asked a mentor of mine one time, I said, well, Pete, how do you build trust? He said, you make a promise one at a time and you keep them and you keep doing it, right? Because that builds trust. Here's another one. I appeal to others to share an exciting dream of the future. Well, shoot, as the CIO, that's my job. That's my job. Can I get people fired up about the future? Do they even know what it looks like and feels like? And what does that mean for them? So for any leaders on the call, you had asked the question, any advice I would give, do the leadership practices inventory. See where you are. And if you're not where you want to be, great. That's your motivation to start. That was where I was. It's like, shoot, I didn't do that today. I didn't do that today. I didn't do that today. But how easy would it be just to go genuinely acknowledge a job well done? Right? Not hard. But we lose sight of it because it becomes, not part of our DNA, part of our daily routine. So again, just a piece of advice, this thing has been very valuable. I went to this training a year ago. It's still on my desk. So that would be another piece of advice, or at least a learning nugget that I got from Jim Kuzis and Barry Posner.
Jon, thank you so much for your time. This is awesome.
I appreciate it, man. Anytime. You just let me know.
That sounds good. Take it easy, Jon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.